right, so I'm going to see if I can lean on you a little bit.
Good.
So you say God is almighty. You say that God exerts influence, works to heal is another phrase that you use in the book. At the same time, you say that part of the reason that God can't single-handedly eliminate suffering and evil in the world is that God doesn't have a body, right? So God can't directly affect things in the physical realm. So what does it look like concretely? What does it look like for God to work, to heal, to exert influence?
Yeah. It's a huge question, and people have been wrestling with this, not only in the Christian tradition, but outside it in other traditions, and still today. It's what scholars like me talk about in terms of what we'll call it divine action. How do we talk about God actually doing something? I mean, some theologians, even some who believe in God, don't think God does anything. In fact, they describe God in such a way that any language whatsoever we would have about what God does is from the very start false. Thomas Aquinas is a good example of someone like this. He so distinguishes God's action from creaturely action that there's no analogies between. And so in the technical language, this is called apophatic theology. That is, none of our language, our ideas, our words can tell us anything true about God acting. Now, I reject that view. I think we should talk about God's action, and there's some similarities between God's action and our actions. But as you point out, one of the things I say is that God doesn't have a localized physical body like you and I do. So, I can't look out my window right now and happen to see God strolling out to get the mail next door, because God doesn't have a localized body. God is what the tradition has said is incorporeal, which means bodiless. And God is somehow a spirit. God is like a mind or the wind or gravity or something like that. So you've got this omnipresent spirit that you can't perceive with your eyes, you can't smell, you can't taste. How are you going to talk about that thing doing stuff in the world?
Yeah, right.
And the way that I and most people do is resort to kind of more abstract and philosophical categories. And that is to say things like God is like a cause, but that cause isn't a controlling cause. So to give an analogy, most people think that humans have minds, and minds exert causal influence on our brains and bodies. But no one can look under a microscope and see our mind. So you got something you can't perceive, but it's exerting causal influence. Now, the difference is none of us think our minds are omnipresent, where we think God is omnipresent. But that begins to move us toward trying to answer your really important question, one that has vexed many theologians for millennia.